Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 2013 inductees of the National Women's Hall of Fame, led by the Board of Directors.
Would you please stay standing for the presentation of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance led by the Girl Scouts of Nye-Pin Pathways. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the inductees and acceptors please be seated, and the audience please take your seats. Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Women's Hall of Fame 24th induction ceremony. I am Beth Quillen Thomas, and this is my colleague and co-president, Beverly Ryder. Once again, we gather in Seneca Falls, New York, to honor and recognize American women who have been a first, a pioneer in their field of endeavor, or instrumental in opening a door through which many others could walk. This year, we are privileged to induct 9 exceptional American women who were nominated by their fellow citizens, the American people, as holders of important milestones in the struggle for women's rights and equal opportunity. One of the hallmarks of induction is the requirement that each woman who is selected by our independent panel of judges must attend the ceremony in order to be inducted. For those who are being inducted posthumously, the closest living relative, direct ancestor, or a noted colleague or scholar in their field is invited to accept on their behalf. Seated behind us are this year's inductees and acceptors. Each of them has earned the right to this recognition, and we are honored to be part of memorializing their stories in this very special place of Seneca Falls, in the National Women's Hall of Fame. The hall is a place where their stories will be added to those of 247 prior inductees, so that girls and boys, women and men, both nationally and globally, can be inspired to follow their own dreams and ambitions. It is indeed a center for great women. We'd now like to take a moment to introduce several inductees who have joined us for this year's ceremony. Betty Bone Scheiss, who was inducted in 1994, Karen DeCrow, who was inducted in 2009, Susan Kelly Dries, inducted 2009, Dr. Ali Latimer, inducted in 2009, Lily Ledbetter, inducted in 2011, and Dr. Judy Pfeiffer, inducted in 2007. Would you please stand where you... Thank you. Again this year, we are delighted to have a great friend of the hall, anchorwoman Jenny Ryan from Rochester's 13 Wham TV, who will serve as the MC for this afternoon ceremony. Thank you, Jenny, for being again part of our story.
First Lady Michelle Obama has sent us greetings from the White House, which I'd like to read to you. I am pleased to send my warmest greetings to all those attending the National Women's Hall of Fame's 24th induction ceremony. For decades, the National Women's Hall of Fame has honored and celebrated the pioneering achievements of great American women. By recognizing women from a large array of fields, from the arts to athletics, business to education, and philanthropy to government, the National Women's Hall of Fame reminds us all of the countless contributions women have made to our country. I also want to congratulate the 9 incredible women being celebrated today. Each woman being honored is a positive example for young women around the world, and I know your legacy will live on for generations to come. I am especially pleased to know that Representative Nancy Pelosi is being inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Throughout her career, Representative Pelosi has consistently elevated the role women play in our government, and her leadership has inspired thousands. As you gather today to celebrate the many women the National Women's Hall of Fame has honored, especially those new inductees, I send you my best wishes for a successful event. We are also pleased to have received a message from former New York Senator and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who was inducted in 2005.
Hello, Seneca Falls, and to all of my friends there. I am delighted to be able to bring greetings to everyone gathered for today's ceremony. And I'm especially grateful for the chance to join Rosalind Carter in celebrating the life and legacy of our former First Lady, Betty Ford, as she takes her rightful place in the National Women's Hall of Fame. I recently had the opportunity to visit the Ford Library and Museum in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and was able to pay my respects at Betty's memorial there. She was truly a great American and an inspiration. I want to say congratulations to all of this year's inductees. You know, Seneca Falls is the perfect place to examine the future and honor the past. There really must be something in the water and the air here, for this region was home to so many movements, from women's rights to religious freedom, abolition, labor organizing, people united here to fight for their rights and push our country closer toward that more perfect union. As you know, we are celebrating the 165th anniversary of the Women's Rights Convention right here in Seneca Falls. Thanks to so many brave and forward-thinking women and men, we have made enormous progress. Women have more opportunities than at any time in history. We lead our lives as mothers and grandmothers of ours could never have lived, and our fathers and grandfathers could never have imagined. And yet, you know as well as I, there is much work to be done here at home and across the globe to ensure that every person has the chance to fulfill his or her God-given potential and to lead lives of freedom, dignity, and equality. We still have too many women who are not yet able to live out those dreams. They remain out of reach of the mobility that we promise if you work hard. So the National Women's Hall of Fame serves as a reminder that we do indeed stand on the shoulders of all those who came before. So let us now think about what we can do to continue the progress that is necessary to make it possible for even more women to make a difference today. I know we have a responsibility to those who will come after us as First Lady, Senator of the great state of New York, and Secretary of State. I saw firsthand the importance, the power of the cause that began right here in Seneca Falls. So please join with me in congratulating all of those who are now being inducted and who are already in the Hall of Fame. I remember very well the importance of the time when I myself was inducted. So I am grateful that this important ceremony continues, that it honors women from all walks of life, and that it serves as both a reminder and a challenge of what still we must do together. Thank you all, and enjoy this important day.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jenny Ryan of 13 Wham. And isn't it truly a wonderful life in Seneca Falls today? The movie made Christmas famous around here, but you couldn't ask for a better day. Yeah, the leaves, the foliage, stunning, right? And the Finger Lakes wine at its best. You can have some of that later. But what's extraordinary today, truly, are these people. This is what makes Seneca Falls a special place. This is what puts Seneca Falls on the map. And we are so glad all of you are here today to witness this history and be a part of it. It is a special place. And we begin. Our first inductee, Emma Hart, was the 16th of 17 children born in Berlin, Connecticut, to a family that valued education. Her mother was literate at a time when very few women in New England could read and write, and her father believed in educating his daughters as well as his sons. She attended local schools and began her teaching career in 1804. In 1807, she moved to Middlebury, Vermont to manage a women's academy, and soon after married John Willard. As was customary after marriage, she retired from teaching for a period of time and returned to her profession and opened a girls' school in her home. Struck by the contrast between the education she could offer her students and the curriculum provided to young men at a nearby college, she wrote a plan for improving female education. The document advocated equal education for young women through the academy level. At the encouragement of Governor DeWitt Clinton, Willard moved to New York in 1819 and opened a school in Waterford. In 1821, she relocated again to Troy and opened the Troy Female Seminary, renamed the Emma Willard School in her honor in 1895. The school saw thousands of young women pass through its doors during Willard's lifetime. For her pioneering efforts to create equal educational opportunities for young women by establishing an all-girls educational institution which still exists as one of our nation's leading schools for young women, Emma Willard is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting the medallion for Emma Willard is Trudy Hall, head of the school, the Emma Willard School.
I'm channeling Emma now. I'm thrilled to accept this award on behalf of our school's founder, Emma Hart Willard, a pioneer in breaking educational barriers for women in the U.S. over 200 years ago. A woman whose legacy thrives today at her school, Emma Willard School, an internationally admired school with over 8,000 living alumni. And as I warmly thank the National Museum of Women for the honor bestowed on Madam Willard, I feel compelled to add some context so that we can all understand the true significance of Emma's accomplishment. Had Emma received such an honor in her lifetime, she would not have stood before you then either. At the time, it would have been considered a radical social misstep for a woman to deliver a public oratory. However, given her sizable ego, she would have absolutely delighted in this honor. She would have been tickled pink, and her elation would have been evident in the very eloquent remarks she would have prepared for her husband, her son, or her minister to deliver in her stead. Times for women in these United States have certainly changed, and the vision and persistence of Emma Hart Willard is no small reason why. As Emma would have been the first to remind you, an educated woman is an empowered woman, and Emma's contributions laid the foundation that changed forever America's understanding of and commitment to educating women. Her vision remains relevant 200 years later because her cause remains relevant. Women the world over need access to quality education. Secondly, we would not be in Seneca Falls celebrating these honors had it not been for Emma Willard, as it was Emma who founded the school from which Elizabeth Cady Stanton graduated while Emma was the head. It's perhaps where she picked up some of her radical ideas before putting herself and Seneca Falls squarely on the women's rights historical map. It's no small coincidence that these two women share educational ties. Indeed, during her lifetime, Emma's school was the premier school for women who dreamed of changing the world, and her powerful network included presidents, governors, journalists, industrial giants. She was a thought leader centuries before we knew the meaning of the phrase. And what would Emma say if she were here right now? Let me assure you, she would fit right in with this group of smart, bold, powerful, substantive women. She was a woman of substance and ambition who knew how to impress. With a penchant for French hats, which I decided not to wear today, an eye for handsome men, of which there are many in this audience, and a passion for travel to broaden her vision, she would have inspired you with her intellectual depth and breadth and her love of spirited debate. She might have shared her concern that the failure to educate women properly did not serve either women or the nation, noting, quote, "The education of females has been exclusively directed to fit them for displaying the charms of youth and beauty. Though well to decorate the blossom, it is far better to prepare for the harvest." And her philosophy of women's education has proved timeless, and she would have shared it. Quote, "Education should seek to bring its subjects to the perfection of their moral, intellectual,
and physical nature in order that they may be of greatest possible use to themselves and others. A Renaissance woman who not only painted and wrote poetry, but understood anatomy, wrote books on geography, and believed in the importance of vigorous exercise. Emma was a radical in her time. She claimed, "I knew that I would be regarded as a visionary almost to insanity if I had uttered my expectations for which I entertained in connection with my plan. Fortunately for the world, she pursued her plan with determined will and entrepreneurial energy." Her school, in which she first modeled innovative pedagogy in 1814 in Middlebury, Vermont, is still thriving this year, celebrating our bicentennial year. The words of her school's alma mater, sung with great spunky pride at her school, show something about the inspiration she continues to offer girls. And so let me close by sharing just one stanza, and it's okay, I'm not going to sing. Come, let us sing together a song of grateful praise in honor of our founder, the joyous strains upraise. 'Twas she beheld the vision and wrought with steadfast will. 'Tis we, with joyous labor, that vision must fulfill. This award is a song of grateful praise for a woman who beheld an extraordinary vision. It is most certainly with joyous labor that those of us committed to girls' education around the world honor her legacy in the best way imaginable by sustaining it. Thank you for acknowledging Emma Hart Willard and her life's work, as in doing so you honor 2 centuries of educated women who have been inspired by her example. It is with pleasure and sincere gratitude that Emma Willard School and I join with you to induct Emma Hart Willard into the National Women's Hall of Fame, where her story will surely inspire for generations to come.
Thank you, Trudy. Our second inductee is Ina May Gaskin. Born and raised Is that the Tennessee contingent for Ina May? All right. All right. Born and raised in Iowa, Ina May Gaskin earned a BA in English from the University of Iowa. She went on to join the Peace Corps and taught English in Malaysia for 2 years before returning to the U.S. to obtain a master's in English from the Northern Illinois University in 1967. During the birth of her first child in the 1960s, Gaskin experienced having her child pulled into the world with forceps. The incident fueled her determination to find a saner way to give birth. A few years later, during a 5-month-long speaking tour with her husband and more than 200 young idealists along with her, she witnessed her first birth, one of many that would occur during the trip. Because many of the women involved were without health insurance or money to pay for a doctor, she often assisted in births by default, eventually aided by the instruction and support of a sympathetic doctor. In 1971, the group purchased a large tract of land in rural Tennessee and established a cooperative community. She located a doctor willing to serve as a mentor and medical liaison, and the Farm Midwifery Center was born. Since its founding, more than 3,000 babies have been born on the property, with extremely low rates of medical intervention. For your pioneering work in the field of natural childbirth, resulting in the advancement of authentic midwifery, Ina May Gaskin, you are inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
What an honor it is to be here today to accept this wonderful award. I would like to greet the members of the 2013 Induction Committee, my fellow inductees, and all who've come to this ceremony, to this beautiful, historic place. Here we are in the territory of the Six Nations, Cayuga, Seneca, Oneida, Onondaga, Mohawk, and Tuscarora. And I'm going to read. I don't usually do this, but I'm too full of stories. I have to limit myself here. It was at the Onondaga Nation about 3 decades ago that I had my one and so far only chance to legally attend a birth in this beautiful state. Ordinarily, it would be a felony. Let me tell you about it. I am licensed in Tennessee, but New York State does not yet recognize my kind of certification, despite its proven excellence. It's one of the 23 states that has yet to recognize the certified professional midwife. The baby's mother, a midwife herself, who had already gone to quite a few births with me in Tennessee, wanted me to help her with her expected breech baby, her 4th, instead of her having an otherwise mandatory cesarean. The Onondaga Reservation is actually not legally part of New York State. Did you know that? So I did not risk a felony charge by complying with her wishes. The birth was lovely, by the way, a great big boy. He's a lacrosse player, I believe now. And the maternal grandmother of the baby, the late Audrey Shenandoah, clan mother and Onondaga traditional elder, attended the birth, radiating her usual calm, wisdom, love, and good humor. She continues to be a source of great inspiration for me 2 years after her passing. Everything must be in balance, she reminds us. She talked about how male and female roles in a society must balance, not dominate each other. Elizabeth Cady Stanton had the same philosophy, quote, "Man and woman are the complement of one another." It's a great honor to be chosen as the 3rd U.S. midwife to be inducted into this Women's Hall of Fame. I follow in the steps of Ann Hutchinson of Massachusetts and Mary Breckinridge, the extraordinary woman who established the Frontier Nursing Service Midwifery Corps in rural Kentucky, nearly 90 years ago, Kentucky. Those horse and mule riding midwives served 1,000 families scattered over 700 square miles of back hills territory when midwifery had already been eliminated in most of the rest of the country. This home birth service, because that's what it was, lasted for 4 decades before the home birth section of it was swept away following Mary Breckinridge's death. Her great project actually demonstrated that some of the poorest and most poorly nourished women could get through pregnancy with some of the best maternal infant outcomes in the whole country, as long as midwifery care and midwifery education were organized along the lines that she prescribed, her model. There was not a single maternal death in the first 1,000 births, and the newborn death rate was extremely low as well. Be aware, we're talking about both home prenatal care and birth services in the context of no roads, few, if any, bridges over the creeks, which were sometimes swollen with flash floods, no phones of any kind, no electricity, no running water, during a time when there mostly were no antibiotics, blood transfusions, no epidurals or fetal monitors. Quite an accomplishment, huh? Well-prepared midwives could recognize emergencies requiring hospitalization and surgery in early stages, allowing for transport in a timely way to a hospital. Unfortunately, the Frontier Nursing Service model did not sweep the country on the merits of its demonstrated good outcomes. If that had happened, I think sometimes I might have avoided the unnecessary forceps delivery that I was made to have, the one that made me search for a better way to have a baby. Few feminists of the 20s adopted the Elizabeth Cady Stanton perspective on birth, which also matched Mary Breckinridge's personal experience and philosophy. Listen to what Stanton had to say about her 6th child's birth born, of course, at home with a midwife in attendance without any form of anesthesia. Quote, "I never felt such sacredness in carrying a child as I have in the case of this one. She's the largest and most vigorous baby I've ever had, weighing 12 pounds. And yet, my labor was short and easy. I laid down about 15 minutes and alone with my nurse and one female friend brought forth this big girl. I sat up immediately, changed my own clothes, put on a wet bandage, and after a few hours repose, sat up again. Am I not almost a savage? For what refined, delicate, genteel, civilized woman could get well in so indecently short a time?" Well, I think she had abandoned the corset long ago. Okay. Instead, the suffragists of the early 20th century fell for the fear-based approach to birth, and this was linked to the elimination of the midwifery profession, which had already pretty much happened. This was a development that took place only in the US and in no other human society that we know of prior to that time. This unique experience soon led to an epidemic of overuse of forceps, so that the year that I gave birth, I was one of the 67% of women having a forceps delivery. My thought was if we were meant to be pulled into the world, nature would have provided a handle right here. In other countries of similar development where midwifery remained a respected profession, the forceps rate would have been 5% or less. So this was, for me and countless other women, imbalance at its worst, when the medicalized view of birth extinguished the midwifery knowledge of women's capacity to give birth, and thus prevented women from experiencing their own power in this way. Fear took over and paved the way for widespread ignorance and the spread of even more fear. Now, beginning in the 70s, when fathers started being allowed to be present at the births of their children, forceps were replaced by a rising cesarean rate. Okay, so it was exactly 43 years ago today that we set out on that caravan that was mentioned. Now, here's a big difference between me and Mary Breckenridge. I was not already a public health nurse, as you know, and nor was I able to take advantage of a 4-month course in England in order to become a midwife. I couldn't get to England. But I was free to learn from any sources I considered relevant. I had no boss, but I had this wonderful mentor, and I eventually met some traditional midwives, learned from them and also from old midwifery books. I also learned from animals and doctors. And that is not in any particular order of importance, right? My colleagues and I, for I recruited several, placed women's needs at the center of our policy making and found this way of organizing care yielded huge benefits for our babies as well as their mothers. We learned how to prevent complications by providing sensitive prenatal care. We learned how to alleviate pain with smooching, jokes, dancing, singing, and other things that you don't generally find in medical books, but where really, really work. Here's one of my favorites. Why would that work? Try it a few times and you might be able to figure it out. At this point, let me say that my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Ina Beard Stinson, who was the age I am now when I was born, was a strong role model for me. She introduced me to the women that she admired as soon as she realized I was ready to stop reading about animals and start reading about humans. So I had to read about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Emma Willard, Susan B. Anthony, Clara Barton, Jane Addams, Helen Keller. And my other role models were those doctors who recognized that American women would be subjected to fewer forceps deliveries if we if we reincorporated midwifery into the maternity care package. I met on the caravan Dr. Louis Lapierre. I believe he's still alive. And I thought, Louis Lapierre at my door offering to teach me obstetrical skills? Come on in. We had a short course, and the next birth, everything he taught me was something I needed to use. Such a blessing that this happened. Etta Willis was another strong teacher of mine. She had got her midwifery training in Belize, and she was a district midwife in Guatemala when I met her in 1976. Her job was to supervise the non-literate traditional midwives in the high mountains, and she was humble enough to recognize that those traditional midwives had a superior way of dealing with the feared complication called shoulder dystocia. In plain language, that's the shoulders are stuck in the mother's pelvis when the baby's head is already out. The method that doctors used to teach at the time was break the collarbone. I'd never done that, fortunately, but her method was very easy to remember, and she'd learned it from these non-literate midwives. Turn the woman over to her hands and knees, and usually the baby will fall out. Why? Because the woman's pelvis is actually bigger from front to back in that all-fours position. I don't know that I would have thought of that on my own. When I went back now to ask those midwives where they'd learned it, they said, Dios, we learned it from God. So as I teach that to obstetricians nowadays, and they tell me, one of them told me, it's from God. And I said, actually, you're right, and gave them that story. Traditional midwives from the rural South or Southwest, I'm going to name some names: Margaret Charles Smith, Gladys Milton, Annie Lee Logan. All of those three have books telling their stories, were huge sources of inspiration for me and remain so. All of these midwives recognized, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, that birth is a sacred event. And they comported themselves in such a way as to be worthy of such great responsibility. There's kind of a difference between this and the writing of Simone de Beauvoir, who deserves a lot of respect for how incredibly influential she was. But when it got to human reproduction, she described it as a passive role for a woman that wasn't, quote, an activity in a human. She was both plant and animal, a stockpile of colloids who couldn't take pride in what she'd created because she hadn't really made that baby. Now, you can probably tell that de Beauvoir it was her mind that meant the most to her. And the fact that she had never given birth made her less of an authority on that than she was in the area of her scholarship. Now, when we were discussing the role of the Six Nations women, Audrey Shenandoah, whom I mentioned earlier, used to talk about how raising and educating children was also a sacred task among her people. And making sure that the family was properly nourished was another biggie. These were sacred duties for women, ways of ensuring a balance between male and female roles in life. You might be interested to know that among the Six Nations, only men could be chief, but only women had the vote. Interesting, very balanced. It's not the only way of organizing things, but it's one way to achieve balance. Another was that only men would be warriors, but only women declared war. And the women did have also the power of impeaching a chief if this individual no longer deserved that office. Balance. Margaret Charles Smith, whom I mentioned earlier, a grand midwife from Alabama who lived to the age of 99, having attended more than 3,000 births in her 40-year career. She told me once, and she was the only midwife in her area, so she had an amazing responsibility. And it took her away from her home, from her 3 sons, a lot of the time. When you're gone so much, she said, things go loose at home. She was right. In my own case, the demands of doing a good job of midwifery meant that my family time was sacrificed. I remember one Christmas when I had a breech birth downstairs, and then when that one came, I had to go upstairs for another one. No Christmas meal for me, and time with my family that year. I'm sure that my absence kept me from listening deeply to some of the confusion that my sons particularly were experiencing at school, and some of the things they were learning about the role of men in the world. Why did it seem like men were being criticized for all the problems in the world? They told me these things later. I think they tried to tell me younger, but I didn't always hear. Why was competition seen as a bad thing? Why didn't we have organized sports? Were there any heroic men who looked like them whom they could look up to? It was just a month ago, if you can believe that. I'm 73 now, right? And I stumbled across the work of a great woman thinker, writer, and former philosophy professor, and I'm going to mention her name here. I've never met her, but I've read all 4 of her books recently, Christina Hoff Sommers. Now, some have criticized her as being anti-feminist, but I think she's not. I think she perceives, as I do, that the sexes are different but equal, and that we should always be seeking balance, not the domination of one by another. I was surprised in her book, Who Stole Feminism, to read of the how poor the quality of scholarship was that produced some of the data upon which huge policy changes were made, particularly in the area of domestic violence. I've seen some of the results of such policy changes in my community, and I didn't understand how we'd got that way. But some of these policy changes haven't been positive because they've had an effect of diminishing fathers' rights and sometimes the ability of fathers to be with their children when a relationship has not worked out. I think that her books, The War on Boys, One Nation Under Therapy, as intellectual work whose time has come. And I believe it has the potential to correct some of the excesses in public and educational theory and policies that were pushed by a kind of feminism, a strain in feminism that was hostile to men and boys. Her critique of the recklessness with statistics and facts and the poor scholarship that characterized some, not all of the studies, were seized upon by the mass media, and this was eye-opening to me. So if she's a right-wing ideologue, I guess I am too. But actually, I think I'm a moderate. I think she is too. Her ideas on how to address the trouble that American boys are in scholastically, I think deserve a real look, not reflexive defensiveness. Pathologizing maleness does not produce real advances for women any more than pathologizing femaleness created a good environment for women. So let's look for balance. I'm going to mention now another one of my great inspiring mentors, and that's Jessica Mitford, who wrote The American Way of Birth. So let's recognize that female and male power can and must coexist. We need strong women. We also need strong men. We need heroes for both. We need heroic storytelling, because in this way we inspire our young people. And I want to give a special thanks to my sons, Samuel and Paul, for teaching me what young men need. I love you both. And thank you to all in this Hall of Fame. Thank you very much. Thank you. And a big thank you to all you midwives and midwifery students. We need you so much. And don't forget the doulas.
You have a fan club. Congratulations, Ina. Our third inductee is Julie Krone. Raised on a horse farm in Eau Claire, Michigan, Julie Krone began riding horses at an early age and won her first horse show when she was 5 years old. At the age of 14, after watching 18-year-old Steve Cawthon win a Triple Crown, she set her sights on becoming a jockey. 2 short years later, Julie made her debut riding Tiny Star at Tampa Bay Downs. And less than a month later, she won her first race aboard Lord Farkle on the same track. She soon became the first female leading rider at Monmouth Park, the Meadowlands, Belmont Park, Gulfstream Park, and Atlantic City Race Course. Among her myriad of accomplishments, she won 6 races in one day at both the Meadowlands twice and Monmouth Park, and won 5 races in one day at Saratoga Race Course and Santa Anita Park. In 1993, Julie rode Colonial Affair to victory at the Belmont Stakes and made history. As the first woman to win a Triple Crown event, she set records again in 2003 as the first woman to win a Breeders' Cup event at the Juvenile Fillies and the first woman to win a $1 million event at the Pacific Classic. In 2000, she became the first woman inducted into the National Museum of Racing's Hall of Fame. With more than 3,700 career wins, Julie Krone is the leading female thoroughbred horse racing jockey of all time. Initially retired from horse racing in 1999, she returned to the sport in 2002, retiring for the final time in 2004. For your pioneering achievements in the field of horse racing and in recognition of being the leading female thoroughbred horse racing jockey of all time, Julie Krone, you are inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. She said I could use the stool if I needed it, but I think I'm okay. It was fun to listen to Ida speak because I went that route when my beautiful Lorelei came into the world. I had a doula and a midwife. Yes. And my husband tells me that she gets heavier and the hours get longer, but it was she was 8, 9, and it took 33 hours. Yes. So today is obviously like a really big day, and I think being up here and having my husband and my daughter, and my mother is in heaven looking down at us. She passed away early at 50. I'm getting inducted to the Hall of Fame at 50, and my mom passed away at 50. I think I'm getting a way better deal. For sure. Also, I think there's a nice man here, John Robbins, sitting at our table, and he was the one that's kind of responsible for nominating me. And I can imagine it was a very hard job, so thank you, John, very much. And for those of you that have brothers out there, any women, big brothers that tied you to burning barrels and hung you and put you on the front of a car and drove around a field and said, let's see how long I can drive before you fall off. Once he even put me in a little chicken coop for a couple hours, but I never got out until my mom got home. He made me very tough. And he made me really resilient, and I never thought I'd say this, but I thank him for all those days that he tortured me. Well, today's interesting, and I can't help but think of this really cool woman, Kathy Kussner, and she was an equestrian, and she participated in some of the Olympics. Like, I know they go in 4 years, and I'm really bad at numbers. You know, like 2 or 3 different years, I think she participated, gold medals, silver medals, and such. However, when she went to go get her jockey's license as the first female, they told her that they didn't think girls could like handle racehorses and negotiate through the herd of horses and the starting gate and everything. So she went to court and made my job a lot easier afterwards, walking in that little office and getting my jockey's license. So I thank Kathy Kushner for all the things she did. It's really funny when she tells the stories, because she says, it's the most fun 4 minutes I ever had in my life. Because she walked into the courtroom, and how the story goes, I guess, they walked in, they read, girls aren't jockeys and they can't be allowed to. And the judge was just like, well, this is so not working. And he planned the anvil and girls could have license. So that was it. 4 minutes of her life and, changed the history. I do my very best every day to become better for horses. Like anything we do, unless you're really at a level where you're almost, communicating with some type of like a silent kind of feeling almost, it makes you know that all the time until you get things so subtle and so intense that you're not doing your very best. So like I'm almost like that with horses now. So even after all those victories and all those rides, I know that they can always be better and softer. The horse whisperer thing, kind of a thing. So I really dedicate myself to becoming better every day, even at this point. So in the 80s, when my mom and I set out for Kentucky, nothing was perfect. It was far from perfect. My father was really mad at me for quitting school, because he's a school teacher, and he was just like, oh, this is like the worst thing ever, it could ever happen. And it was the good old days when we counted all the change that we had, and I think it came to about $50. And that tank of gas got us all the way from Michigan to Kentucky. So it was kind of cool, to be able to count your change and buy gas with that. Once we got there, we found out that I was too young to be licensed. So isn't that a bummer? We had no more change to count under the seat, so we kind of needed to get jobs. So my mom, being the wonderful sport that she was, she went and got a hot walking job, and then she took me to a school, and it was really cool because she took me to the school and she found out all the things I had to do to get working papers and all that, right? But still, it was May, and in July I would be 16, and so my mom did what any mother does. I mean, she gave birth to me, so on the day I was born, she's entitled to change the month if she wants. She took it in, I promise you, and only mothers can do this, by the way. She took it in and she had erased she took the 5 and did it on a typewriter, and then she put it on a Scotch tape and she covered the 7 and she Xeroxed it off at the grocery store, and she walked into the school and she was just like, don't you say anything, because I was like the honest, like, oh mom, we're lying, this feels really bad, and she was like, you just follow me and don't say anything. And so she changed my birth date, and only a couple months, so it was okay. And I got my license, and that's a kind of thing. Yeah, thank you. That's a good spirited mom, right? It's from the very beginning. It was interesting once she got my job, and once I got a job, and she got me all straightened away at the racetrack, and she didn't want me to live on the track, with the hooligans and the riffraff and everything. So she made sure that the trainer and his wife would take me home, and I could have a relatively, cool life off the racetrack and then go back to the track and work. I had no idea when she drove away that day. It was funny, when she was leaving, I was playing with some kids, soccer in the yard and stuff, and my life as a jockey was starting. And as she drove away, I had no idea that I was going to miss her as much as I did. I was like, can you imagine a 16-year-old girl, what they think of their mothers? It's like, see you later. Phew, thank goodness. I'm out from under that, But we have no idea, when they leave, how it really feels when a mother drives away, because it was just really cool. I guess in all her bigness and everything, too, it made it even worse. She was, there was a lot missing in her absence. Anyway, so I was looking up at those twin spires, in Kentucky, and I was thinking that, wow, this is just really cool. However, I was just walking hots, okay? I wasn't being a jockey, and it really wasn't perfect. I wanted to be a jockey, not a hot walker, all right? It's like, you want to be, a senator, not an intern, right? It's like the same. I was like a non-paid intern, basically. Oh, that reminds me, I got $50 a week Is that like crazy? Like, 12-hour work days? And I mean, during that time, I found the key to the quarter pole. I got a saddle stretcher. And I think I'm actually the only person that ever really succeeded in getting that bucket of steam. All right? Have anybody ever tried that? So there is no key to the quarter pole, and there is no saddle stretcher, okay, people? But what happens is when you walk from barn to barn, and the trainer sends you, he says, Julie, I need you to go get that saddle stretcher, right? So you walk off to the next barn, you go to the tack room, and you go, hey, Mr. Vanberg, Clarence sent me over here for the saddle stretcher. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, it starts, And they send you to the next barn, and the next barn, and the next barn, and the next barn, and the next barn, until you realize the joke, okay? So it didn't take me that long when they sent me the key to the quarter pole, though. I caught on really fast. So that job my first job in Kentucky only lasted a couple months, and I found myself back at home and back in school, starting all over again. I was like far from perfect. I was really frustrated. But I found a way to get to some thoroughbred horses right there in Michigan, because it really does. The whole reason all of it is done for me is because of my love for the horses, and everything about them. The fair tracks, they're small time, and when they have horses that can win or run, they take a hat and they walk around and they bid on it, and they take $5 here, $10 here, and then the person who wins gets to grab all the money in the hat. So it was like kind of a cool thing to be on a really kind of a small track and like see the really roots of like communities and stuff like that and all the cool stuff that they can do with horses. And it was a really good place to develop my skills. There weren't too many people around to see me make some really silly mistakes, okay? I was far from perfect as a starting jockey. I had some brilliance. So there's this thing where jockeys have this skill, and the horse is running, and you're pushing on the horse's neck, and you have your whip in your right hand. And you take the whip and you twirl it, and it goes up, and it spins around, right? And it's just really beautiful. And then you smack the horse on the right side, and the horse is running along, and then the horse is kind of like, I don't think I can win anymore. So you pull the stick through to the left hand, right? And it's kind of like that thing where someone taps you on the shoulder, and then you look back, and they've slipped over to this side, and you're like, oh, you got me, right? And it's the element of surprise. So the skill of changing your stick from one side to the other is like really a cool thing. So somebody told me one time, hey, hit this horse left-handed. So I took my right hand and I reached over my horse, and I was like, and when I got back, like 4 of the jockeys, they met me like there, and they were like, oh no, you can never do this again. They were like, that's so embarrassing. And so it was a good place to develop my skills and get a little help. And during that summer, I didn't get killed like they said I was gonna at the beginning of the year. I lived through the whole summer, and my father embraced the idea that I wanted to be a jockey, and he photographed my whole summer, and he celebrated like my love for the racing. And so I had a new plan, and I had the pictures that my dad took, and I had proof that I was a good jockey, so I headed off to Tampa Bay Downs in Florida. And when I got there, it's really crazy because you go up to a stable gate, and they won't let you in. It's, the more I think about it, it's a lot like politics, Nancy. It's like they won't let you in to get a job, right? But you can't get a job to get in. It's like one of those, like if you could get in, you could get a job, but you can't get in, so they don't let you in. It's like really, you go like, well, how am I supposed to get a job if you don't let me in? And they're like, nope, you can't come in without a job. So I said, okay. So I grabbed my pictures that my dad took of me, the proof that I was such a beautiful, good rider, right? And I walked down, and I kept looking around to see at the security gate, like if anybody was watching. And I stuck my toes in that little fence, and I climbed right over the fence, and I dropped down on the other side, poof, like this, right? And now, it was mine to get a job, like this, right? You should see the look on those guys' faces when you drive in the next day, and you have a job. Wouldn't it stem like some kind of investigation? Well, how did you get the job? Well, because I got in, and no. So I was walking down the road, and this is the coolest story. I was walking down the road at Tampa Bay Downs after I jumped over the fence. My feet had just stopped stinging, right, from the drop down, and I'm walking. And a lady is, hey, and she like stopped her car, and I was like, yeah. She goes, you want a job? I swear to you. And she says, every year my husband helps a jockey become, an apprentice jockey break their maiden and win a race. And she says, and we've never had a girl. She said, he's going to be really surprised when I show up with you. So once I got the job, I started to hitch a ride with a friend, a jockey friend, and they would pick me up at the Denny's in the morning, okay? That's far from perfect, right? Like, you're not like, things aren't going, you know, it's good, I've got the job and things are, but I'm not like, you know, I still am kind of hustling and, you know, doing things halfway. Far from perfect, getting picked up at Denny's, you know? So I finally get a couple horses to get on, and I'm gonna breeze this racehorse. And you guys know, like on the racetrack, how there's, you know, markers, like numbers and stuff? Remember I said my husband said, like, don't do numbers, right? It's just like, so I breeze the horse, and I breeze it from the wrong designated pole. Like, instead of going a half of a mile, I go 5/8 of a mile, right? And I was so excited to breeze the horse, and I come off the track, and the guy was like, you broke off at the wrong pole. It was definitely not perfect, but they let me ride the horse anyway. Phew. It was kind of interesting because the first horse I rode, it finished second, and I was like, and I was so frustrated, and I needed it to be perfect, and I needed that winner. And you want to know what happened to me when I jumped down? I jumped down off of the horse, and my legs were so tired I fell right on my butt. That's how tired a jockey's legs get, like when you ride your first race. In the first couple races, it was pretty cool. Well, I was finally a jockey, and things were starting to change a little bit. And when I'd ride races, sometimes there was this girl, and she was like giving me like bossy tips all the time, you know? Now that I'd learned how to switch my sticks and I didn't reach over and hit them left-handed with my right hand, I thought I was getting pretty sharp at what I was doing. So there's this girl jockey in the racing secretary's office, and every time I'd ride a race, she'd say, well, you should do this, you know, you should like glide with your body like this, or you should push your arms like this, or when the two horses are there, don't go so fast. You know, she had all these things. So finally I went to see who is this Julie Snellings in the office, you know, that's like so good at riding. So I walk up to her, and she's telling me all these things about riding. And I said, well, if you're so good, then why aren't you riding races, right? And I was like really kind of sassy. And she rolls her wheelchair back like this, right? Oh, insert foot. You know, it was like, oh man, I can't believe I just did that. So anyway, what I realized at that point was like none of us get to where we go without someone there that's like lifting us up or tightening the screws on us, or like, you know, getting us better and more perfect and stuff. So that was like one of the first people, you know, other than people that, you know, your mother gave birth to you and your father loves you and stuff like that. That was like one of the first outside people that took an interest in me and said, you know what, you can do this, you know, you're really good at this. And in fact, she went to such a point where she was like, you know, if you're not her agent, I'll be her agent. So she found me a new place to go with better horses, and, you know, a guy to be my agent and everything. So there I was in Maryland, and I was riding a lot of long shots. And in fact, I rode every rogue long shot horse, every horse that, like, you know, oh my gosh, these horses, like, one had one eye, one had a broken ear, you know, one would race the entire race on one rein. You know, it would be like, you know, the races go to the left, the whole entire time he'd be like, oh, I'm sure someone said right. And he would just like bear out the whole time, you know, and I'd be like pulling on one rein. And the reason that I got to ride, you know, all those horses with the bad habits and the crazy things, was that, you know, the girl jockeys, you know, you didn't get the best mounts because those go to the boy jockeys because they're like really better and they're smarter and they're sharper and they're stronger and everything. So I took all my like not perfect horses and my long shots and my rogues and my, you know, the outsiders. And then I started to hear the words, I don't ride girls. My owner doesn't ride girls. This horse needs a really strong rider, right? Girls aren't strong enough. I rode a girl once, and it just didn't turn out well, you know? So it was like, I started, you know, I was inundated with these words, these things, people telling me no all the time, and I couldn't do it. And so I took all those long shots and those horses that were slow and the horses that no one else wanted, and I started winning with them. I did. And when you make slow horses fast, people really start to believe in you. And not only that, but the fans really like you a lot more. It's really cool, you know? Because if you're second or third on a horse that's like 20 or 30 to 1, you get those people going, yeah, you know, like this, and you're like, wow, I didn't think that could be so rewarding being second. But it is. It's pretty cool. That's when, and then I moved my tack from Maryland to Atlantic City, and I was leading rider at my first racing meet, right? And it was pretty nice. Like, it was really, really cool. Some people were really supporting me and thought it was really cool too. And but I still have this image in my mind. There's this one jockey, and he was standing there, and he was in the jocks room, and his valet brought the stuff out to him, and he threw all this stuff in the tack bag, right? He's throwing his helmet in, and his whips, and his little jockey boots, right? And his goggles, and his girth, and he's throwing it all in the bag, and he stands up, and he jerks the bag, and with this really kind of a cute Kentucky accent, he says, "I ain't gonna be at no track where a girl's leading rider," and he stomps out. And I'll never forget like that image of him, like I was celebrating this new me, you know, this winning rider, this leading rider thing, right? And there he was, stomping away, you know, walking away. He was so mad. And I thought to myself, well, there you go. You know, you can't please all the people all the time, and, you know, like one of those people, some of the people, some of the time, and I think that's where those sayings come from. It's like, so obviously I didn't please him or make him happy. So there's a little funny part of you know, you're like, oh, I'm leading rider finally, but things just aren't perfect yet, you know? And so, like, as you go around, and like I said, there's people that acknowledge you and help you. John Forbes was one of the first people that ever tweaked my brain a little bit on how your thoughts can actually control, like, how you interpret things, right? And so he was one of the first ones. I'd start a sentence and I would say, oh my gosh, I went over there and that guy, he was so mean to me. He was like, you can't ride because you're a girl, because you're too strong. He goes, stop listening to him. And he made it like really simple. And he would never stop. Every time I went to complain, he would say to me, don't participate in it. Don't listen to him. Stop doing that, right? And he got me so pure and so simple in my mind for what I was trying to accomplish. I was like the prejudices in the bad jockeys rooms and the people saying, you know, no to me because like of my gender. All of a sudden, like, it started to like kind of, it didn't matter anymore. And I started to realize that I could really focus on things that really mattered, like the things that were really, really important. And I started to notice that, like, maybe things, like, I didn't notice that they weren't perfect anymore, kind of, you know, or I wasn't pleasing everybody because of this new, like, pure way of thinking of, like, I was just going to focus on my thing and what I was doing, and I wasn't going to, like, participate in the prejudice and think of, like, you know, what people thought of me and stuff like that, or I wasn't going to focus on the people that kept saying no to me. So that summer, it was kind of an interesting summer for me because I went to Monmouth Park, which is like kind of a bigger racetrack, and I was leading rider at Monmouth Park, and it was pretty special because Bruce Springsteen even came to the races one day, you know. It was like, you know, he's like, hey, that was a really good ride, you know, and I was like, yeah, Bruce, thank you. And it was really funny because that meet, this is the craziest thing, a girl jockey at Monmouth Park never rode back-to-back races, right? I had to pee in a cup. This is the weirdest thing. I had to pee in a cup, and I had a little makeshift jockey's room set up in the middle of the paddock, like in a little private room with like a guard, a thing on it. And it was a room that had a door and stuff where they do some business stuff with papers. And I was leading rider at Monmouth Park, like in '82, and I was peeing in a cup because there was no facility that could facilitate a female jockey riding back-to-back races. But because what John Forbes taught me in my pure new mind, right, I didn't care. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't bother me. And I was like, I never even noticed half the time. I just set up my little station, and to this day, I set things up like that still, you know? My husband will say, like, this is true. Like, I make a little space in my stuff, but I think it was because of those early days of, you know, being behind that curtain, and, you know, tucking my pants in and all that and everything. So I didn't mind peeing in the cup anymore and participating and being leading rider, and my mom got cancer that year. You want to put perspective to, like, having to not be able to reach a bathroom. My mom got cancer that year. And when I asked her, when I said, Mom, what can I do for you, right? My mom said, win. I want you to win, right? And oh my gosh, the fun days and the energy that I put in, and, like, you know, people making the phone call. She won 3. She won 4. She won 5. She won 6 races. You know, never before done in history, you know, that kind of a thing. it was spurred, to please my mother and to make her happy, and so I won for her. And that summer was really good, and I was leading rider at Monmouth Park, but it certainly was far from perfect when you get the news that your mother has cancer, right? So, yeah, as you can see. So as I went along, I started to realize there was kind of like a pattern to life, and you can see that it's hardly ever perfect, and that you make mistakes and you breeze horses from the wrong poles and stuff like that. And sometimes you celebrate, and you suffer, but as we go along, we can pick what we want to focus on, and it's during this clarity that I think I could step back and I could say to myself, I can make things better for people. So I would go to the management, and instead of being like a mad little athlete, I'd be like, I had this new clarity, and I'd say like, what do you think about us making a facility for girls so they can actually, use it while they participate? And they were like, wow, that's a good idea. And they really never noticed, and they really never thought of it. You have to like tell people things sometimes. It was really crazy. Well, it's during that clarity and that acceptance, when you can make things more perfect. All of a sudden, you make the long shots faster and you make the bad horses better and stuff like that. I even became known, okay, so John Forbes even tricked me into this. It would be pouring rain, and I'm not talking rain, I'm talking rain, sideways, kind of a thing. And like the horses are kind of like with their eye open and they're shh, and I had a horse that was raining so hard one day, I had a horse that kept trying to turn his butt to the wind. Like they do in nature. It's one of those nature things. He's like, okay, you guys are so crazy. I should be like in a field with my butt to the wind right now. Why are we racing, And I brainwashed myself to such a point that all those winners that you talked about, the 5 and the 6, those were almost all done in really bad weather. And they started to call me, the bettors started to call me the Morton Salt Girl. Because when it rains, it pours. It's, and so it's like really cool when you look back on things and you have like a different perspective. So I think when I look out at my daughter sitting there, I think to myself, wow, this is really amazing that I'm standing up here sharing this with her. And when I look at my husband and I realize that I'm pretty sure to this point in my life that no one that I've ever met has loved me unconditionally as much as that man has loved me. So, and it's a pretty wonderful feeling. No, I'm very sure no one has ever loved me that much. And I think of my daughter riding on the merry-go-round at the, and it's so beautiful to watch them ride around on the merry-go-round. But have you ever noticed that it's way more fun to ride a merry-go-round if you have someone to wave to, right? So it's really fun to have you guys to wave to while I'm up here on this merry-go-round. And, all those things along the way, they really weren't that perfect. But right now and today, with them to share it with and this honor, today is as perfect as a day can be. Thank you.
Congratulations again, Julie. Our 4th inductee is Anna Jacobson Schwarz. Born and raised in New York City, Anna Jacobson became interested in economics while attending Walton High School. At the age of 18, she graduated from Barnard College and went on to earn her master's degree in economics from Columbia in 1935 at the age of 19. In 1936, she married Isaac Schwarz and began her professional career with Columbia University's Social Science Research Council, earning her PhD in 1964. Dr. Schwartz's first published paper in 1940, British Share Prices, 1811 to 1850, was a precursor to much of her subsequent work, meticulous in the presentation, explanation, and interpretation of data. In 1941, she began a more than 70-year tenure working for the National Bureau of Economic Research. It was during this time that she met and began working with economist Milton Friedman. Together, they co-authored A Monetary History of the United States, 1967 through 1960. The massive study demonstrated that changes in monetary policy have large effects on the economy and blamed a large portion of the Great Depression on the Federal Reserve. It is one of the most widely cited texts in economics today, considered a leading financial historian and expert on monetary statistics in the US and Britain. Her work demonstrated the importance of the behavior of the money supply and the importance of the behavior of being stable and predictable, forever changing the entire approach to economic policymaking. For her, pioneering work as a female research economist, having been described as one of the world's greatest monetary scholars, Anna Jacobson Schwarz is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting for her today is Dr. Michael Bordeaux, Professor of Economics and Director of the Center for Monetary and Financial History at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Well, now we're going to get into the arcane world of economics, and if you've all taken Econ 101, you can put your heads down and go to sleep. It's a great honor to accept this award for Anna Schwarz, who I knew as a colleague and a friend for over 4 decades. She would have been really thrilled to be here, and unfortunately she died last year. Now, Anna Jacobson Schwarz was among the great economists of the 20th century. She was a pioneer in monetary economics, monetary statistics, and monetary history. She was also one of the few women who made an indelible mark in the mid-20th century in a largely male-dominated discipline. Early in her career, she had to overcome significant barriers to receiving her PhD, and she made her many contributions without having an academic position. Her long career has been an inspiration for many women economists who today are at the forefront of the economics profession. Now, Anna's career began in the 1940s when she started doing research at the National Bureau of Economic Research, known to everybody that's involved with it, the NBER, in New York City. She collaborated with Milton Friedman in writing A Monetary History of the United States, 1867 to 1960, which was published in 1963. This book is considered one of the most important and influential books in economics in the 20th century. The most memorable chapter in that book was their analysis of the Great Contraction from 1929 to 1933, which they attributed to a failure by the Federal Reserve to prevent a series of devastating banking panics that reduced the money supply and reduced spending and brought the United States economy to its knees. Ben Bernanke, the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, learned several lessons from Anna and Milton that may have prevented the recent Great Contraction from turning into another repeat of the 1930s slump. In fact, Bernanke stated in 2002 the following. He said to Anna and to Milton at a big conference at the University of Chicago, he said, "I would like to say to Milton and Anna, regarding the Great Depression, you're right, we did it. We're very sorry, we won't do it again." Anna also wrote 2 other path-breaking books in economics with Friedman, as well as her first book, which was written when she was in her 20s, with Arthur Geyer and Walt Rostow, who used to be an advisor to President Johnson. And that book was called Growth and Fluctuations of the British Economy, 1790 to 1850. Anna published in her lifetime and over her really long career many other seminal articles, both by herself and with others. She contributed greatly to public policy when she chaired the U.S. Gold Commission in 1982, and that topic of gold keeps coming back and back and back again. And she's contributed to the monetary policy debate by being a member of the Shadow Open Market Committee, which sort of tracks the Fed. Now, I first met Anna in 1970 when I was a visiting research associate at the NBER. I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago, and I worked under Milton Friedman, and I was working in monetary history, and I wanted to get to meet Anna because I knew that she was the font of all the data in monetary history. So she was my mentor ever since then, and we had an incredible collaboration. And working with Anna was both hard work and exhilarating. She had extremely high standards in her scholarship, and she kept me on our toes. She was an excellent economist. She reasoned through every argument carefully. She was a stickler for finding, processing, checking, and using the best data. Indeed, much of her research effort was involved in, I quote, getting the data, which was coming from the true NBER tradition that she grew up in. So what I remember most about Anna is how much she loved her work. Her whole life was organized around going to the office. She officially retired from the NBER when she was 65, but she didn't stop working until she was 94. She went into the Bureau every day when she was in her 80s and 90s, and she still put in a full 8-hour day. And she just didn't stop. She loved being involved in economic research and in the policy game. It was her passion. It drove her, even in her later years. Without that extreme intellectual vitality, I don't think she would have lived that long. Now, Anna was a top-flight economist and a hard worker, but she was a balanced person. She had a great family, Isaac, a caring husband with a terrific sense of humor, who died in 1999, 4 children, Naomi, who is here, Jonathan, Paula, and Joel, many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And they all used to come into New York to see her very often. She had season tickets to the Metropolitan Opera, which she loved. She rarely missed a performance. She was an active person in other dimensions as well. She always had a few novels going, and she especially liked Anthony Trollope. She was on top of what was going on in politics and economic policy everywhere in the world. She was continuously consulted by policymakers from everywhere, by scholars, and she was frequently talked to by the press. She read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times each day, picking up every little detail. Anna never missed a beat. I miss Anna. Thank you.
And listening to you speak, I couldn't help but think that she had a hand in our newly appointed Federal Reserve chair, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Our 5th inductee is Betty Ford. Betty Ford will be introduced by her friend and former First Lady, Rosalind Carter. Mrs. Carter was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2001, and she joins us via video.
Good afternoon. I wish I could be with you in person today for the induction of my friend Betty Ford into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And I'm pleased to send my warm regards to Susan and the entire Ford family, and to join you all in celebrating Betty's great achievements and legacy. As we approach the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, I am reminded of the Hall's important role in recognizing pioneering contributions of women and of its value as a national and international institution. I applaud Betty's inclusion in this year's class. I nominated Betty to pay tribute to this remarkable woman, considered by many to have been the most politically active and candid First Lady since Eleanor Roosevelt. She used the influence of her position to change the nation's attitudes about breast cancer, about equal rights, and about treatment for addiction. Her public disclosure of her own personal battle with breast cancer and her struggles with alcohol and painkillers lifted the veil of secrecy from these previously unmentionable issues. Her passionate support of the Equal Rights Amendment has been credited with rejuvenating the movement. At the same time, she commended women who chose not to work outside the home. When she, Lady Bird Johnson, and I stood together at the 1977 National Women's Conference in Houston, it was a very special moment for me as we worked together to improve the status of American women. Betty was also a vocal advocate for children, using her influence to champion federally funded daycare. And when President Ford authorized thousands of orphan children to be evacuated from Vietnam to the United States in the final days of that war, Betty welcomed them to their new lives. Prior to her White House years, seeded in part by her love of dance and her tenure performing with the Martha Graham Dance Company, she provided dance classes in an African American community and to children who were hearing and sight impaired. As First Lady, she supported access to performing and fine arts for children with disabilities and to underserved communities. In our post-White House roles, we found that our interest in addictive diseases and mental health came together in many ways, and that we could be a stronger force if we worked as partners, which we did for many years. In all of her endeavors, Betty's public candor about real-life situations that were traditionally stigmatized broke new ground and made a way for an era of openness. She was willing to do things a bit differently than they had been done before, and she had the grace and courage to fight fear, stigma, and prejudice wherever she encountered them. She was an independent thinker who resisted political and social restraints to become an advocate for justice and civil and political rights. She gave women a voice within their families, in the workplace, and in the political system. We owe so much to Betty Ford, and it is fitting that she will be forever honored in the National Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you.
For using the influence of her position to change the nation's attitudes about breast cancer, equal rights, and treatment for addiction, using her own story to lift the veil of secrecy from these previously unmentionable issues, and give voice to other women within their families, the workplace, and in the political system, Betty Ford is now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Accepting the medallion on behalf of the Ford family is President and Mrs. Ford's daughter, Susan Ford Bowles.
Fellow inductees, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first let me extend special thanks to my mother's dear friend, First Lady Rosalynn Carter, for her nomination of my mom. Rosalynn was and is an extraordinary First Lady and a dear friend to both my mother and me. And her kind nomination makes today extra special. In the summer of 1974, I was an ordinary high school teenager, getting ready to start fall classes. And then, no notice or planning, on August 8th, my mom and I were told that my dad was getting a new job the next day. And our family was suddenly getting a new address, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But just 8 weeks later, all of those wonderful feelings vanished. My mother took me aside upstairs at the White House and quietly said 4 words to me. And I remember them as clearly today as when she told them to me. And my mother whispered to me, "I have breast cancer." In those days, the likely outcome was almost certain. And I just knew that my mom was going to die. I recall exactly her conversation with Dad and with me about whether we should share her diagnosis and treatment with the public. Should she announce that she had cancer? And should anyone, much less the First Lady, for goodness sakes, dare say the word breast in public? How much must Mom and we share with the public? How much should she and we talk publicly about something so personal to any woman, cancer of the breast? Certainly, we could have done what so many before her had and simply say that Mom was having female problems and would soon undergo exploratory surgery to take care of them. But my mother bluntly said, quote, "The time for women hiding this disease in shame behind closed doors has to stop. And who better to make that happen than the First Lady of the United States," end quote. So my mom told the public exactly, and I mean exactly, what was happening to her. She decided to take a very courageous, yet very controversial step to tell the world the truth about her disease. And so she did, and my mother announced to the world the same 4 words that she whispered in secret to me: "I have breast cancer." And in an instant, Betty Ford changed the history of women's health forever. And as one historian concluded, women's health in American history is divided into 2 very unequal parts: before Betty and after Betty. And of course, when she left the White House, my mother didn't leave her candor there. In 1978, my mother showed her strength and courage once again. She confronted her straight on her alcoholism and her addiction. She showed all of us what might mistake for personal weakness is but the gateway to spiritual witness, and most importantly, no life is beyond redemption. So in this, as she is inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, this would have meant so much to my mom, particularly for being recognized with this extraordinary group of other inductees. And she also would be quick to remind us much work remains to be done to make God's world a more just and peaceful place for all of God's children, women and men alike. So let us go forth with the same spirit of courage, integrity, and selfless focus. All of our inductees, Betty Ford would have respected. Nothing, absolutely nothing less from us. So on behalf of Mother, thank you from the bottom of my heart for this extraordinary honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Our sixth inductee is Kate Millett. Born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, Kate Millett studied English literature at the University of Minnesota and St. Hilda's College, Oxford University. In 1970, she received her PhD in comparative literature from Columbia. Her academic career began as an English instructor at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and has included several teaching positions over the years at home and abroad. As a political activist, Dr. Millett's first significant contribution came in 1966, when she was named as the first chair of the Education Committee of the newly formed National Organization for Women, NOW. In 1968, she authored a pioneering report published by NOW, Token Learning, a study of women's higher education in America, in which she challenged women's colleges to provide educational opportunities for women equal to those being provided to men. 2 years later, in 1970, Dr. Millett authored Sexual Politics, a landmark work in feminist theory that fueled the second wave of the women's movement in the U.S. Since then, she has authored numerous articles and essays and 10 additional books. In 1971, she formed Women's Liberation Cinema and produced the feminist classic 3 Lives. Between 1963 and 2009, she had several international solo art exhibitions and installations in sculpture, drawing, serigraphs, and photography. Dr. Millett founded the Millett Center for Arts in 1978 on her own 10-acre farm in LaGrange, New York. The center provides artists and residents accommodations and studio facilities to women artists from all around the world. For your influence, contributions to the feminist movement, and for your contributions as a writer, artist, filmmaker, and teacher and human rights advocate, Kate Millett, you are inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
I want to thank the National Women's Hall of Fame for this great honor. I am here today representing the many comrades in the fight for women's equality, to which we have become known as the second wave of feminism in America, otherwise known as women's liberation. I also want to acknowledge my family who are here with me today in great number. My sister, Sally Rao, a lawyer, my nieces, Kate Rao and Judge Lisa Rao, my nephews, David Rao and Judge Stephen Rao, and my partner in all things, Sophie Kure. I am proud to share this day with them. Like many of my age group, I have lived my life in the checkered sunshine of the empowering ideal of feminism or women's liberation. Early on, I analyzed society in terms of sexual politics, the paradigm of male supremacy under which we have lived so long and thoughtlessly. An activist, I've also lived through the women's movement itself. A fact of it, living within that historical wave, experiencing history with such force, such circumstances, it has changed everything. It gave me friends around the world, most particularly in France and Italy, in Iran and Turkey. We were in the the transformative feeling of that period, sisters in every country, and mentors like de Beauvoir. My association with the French women of des Femmes goes back almost 40 years. Together at the time of the Iranian Revolution in 1979, we met with Iranian women in Tehran, trying to establish a movement which government repression forced underground, here and there. The happiness of those times, the joy of participation, the excitement of being part of my own time, of living on the edge, of being so close to events you can almost intuit them. To raise one's voice in protest, just as the protest is expressed in life, in the streets, in relationships and friendships. Then, in a moment of public recognition, the face of the individual becomes a woman's face. Until now, part of the quotidian, not an exception, but part of the ordinary. Women become the human condition. The voice of struggle and protest becomes our voices. The logic of justice becomes our own earnest argument, sweet and reasonable, or shrill and irreversible and irresistible, but still bringing fairness and equity to the contest. We took the whole of life for our share now. We began to eye the offices of patriarchy, the rewards of money, and become doctors, judges, lawyers, geologists, sports figures, and politicians, artists and diplomats, professors and farmers. We now regarded a single standard of human behavior as normative. No more double standard. We became full human beings. Not that part related to men that we had heretofore, somebody's mother, somebody's wife. We imagined our full humanity acknowledged not as bestowed as youth or beauty or on cooperative comportment. Our full humanity, a huge demand. We had always been permitted human dignity on a case-by-case basis. A mother here, a daughter there, a wife treasured or obedient, no more. We were all human, and we demanded human consideration. More than half the human race. The fact that it took until the Conference of Vienna in the 1990s for us to declare human rights were women's rights, and women's rights were human rights. Not all that entirely either. We are still routinely beaten and tormented. Mistreatment is routine and excused as religious or cultural. Collectively, we own only a fraction of the Earth's surface, enjoy only a minority of its goods and services, including its food, and comprise with our children the world's poor. And the highest percentage of HIV, AIDS infections and deaths. Also, malaria and polio. Women's resistance to oppression is the cutting edge of international human rights activities. But it is as if the project of women's liberation is becoming a little bit harder as time goes by, as shadows of conservatism pass over the world now. And there is war. America is absorbed in an endless war. No shape or conclusion. It goes on and on. There is fundamentalism of the religious right, Christian and Muslim hatreds, male chauvinism, and hatred of the very idea of women's liberation by a new and more determined masculinity. We are undergoing, if not a gender war, a gender attack, an assault on women from all sides, on our newly won human rights, our newly claimed humanity. Without being killed, we are being destroyed. Removed from the ranks of the fully human, we are the victims of genocide. It doesn't need to kill us, it annihilates us. Inequality on the basis of sex is a pervasive reality in women's lives all over the world. So is sex-related violence, in rape, confinement and torture, trafficking, genital mutilation, and domestic violence. This violence is either considered too extraordinary to be believed or too ordinary to constitute human rights violations. If it's happening, it's really not so bad. If it's really not so bad, it's not happening. Well, what this means is that women have not yet become fully human in the legal and political sense, bearers of equally enforceable human rights. The world is in the throes of such an assault upon women now, even as we become invisible, as night after night television news contains screens, crowds of men in demonstrations, no women. Men's face fill the entire space. There are no women anywhere in sight. In certain countries, as if there are no women now at all. They have ceased to register. They have all been erased from public presence. They've been silenced, removed from the ranks of the fully human. Women's political identity is disappearing. Less here, but everywhere, and everywhere more than here. Everything we have fought for and won has lost many times now. I have fought the patriarchy all my life, as a scholar, as a teacher, as a token woman, and as an artist. Was there ever a time, not in the days of Latin dictatorships, Laotian killing fields, CIA assassins, of Contras, contractors, drones, and lies. The United States of America has been at war almost all my adult life. We are now in a permanent state of war, and the unseen, voiceless casualties of war are women and children, so-called collateral damage. I'm the daughter of a feminist, a niece of two others. That first generation of American women born to vote. We carry a wonderful burden of history. The United States of America has developed two additions to civil society: the idea of civil rights and the idea of feminism or women's liberation. I'm proud to be part of it all. Civil rights, anti-apartheid, the struggle of women all over the world, and gays and lesbians in gay liberation. The struggle of the old against the might of the young and affluent. The peacemakers against the violence. And in the understanding that freedom is indivisible and must always be defended. Always. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. Millett. Our 7th inductee is Mother Mary Joseph Rogers. The 4th of 8 children, Mary Josephine Molly Rogers was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts, to Irish Catholic parents. She attended public schools in Boston and later studied at Smith College, graduating in 1905. While studying at Smith, Rogers became inspired by graduating Protestant students, leaving for missionary work in China. Several years after her own graduation from Smith, Rogers returned and started a mission club for Catholic students. While organizing the club, she met Father James A. Walsh, who was launching a mission magazine, in which Rogers took immediate interest and volunteered her time to assist with production. Nearly a decade later, Father Walsh co-founded Mary Knoll Fathers and Brothers, and Rogers was selected as one of the secretaries to direct the group under his guidance. Rogers took the religious name Mother Mary Joseph and oversaw the growth of the congregation and its expansion into mission. In 1920, the group became recognized as the Mary Knoll Sisters, a missionary society of women that ministers to the humanitarian needs of all people, especially the poor, regardless of race, creed, or color. By the time of her death in 1955, there were 1,065 sisters working in 20 countries and several cities in the U.S. The Mary Knoll Sisters became a pontifical institute in 1954, and the name of the congregation was changed to Mary Knoll Sisters of St. Dominic. For her extraordinary vision founding the Mary Knoll Sisters, the first United States-based Catholic congregation of religious women dedicated to a global mission, Mother Mary Joseph Rogers is inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame, accepting on her behalf of Mother Mary Joseph Rogers and the Mary Knoll Sisters is Sister Janet McLaughlin, President of the Mary Knoll Sisters. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good afternoon, everyone. What a privilege for me to represent the Mary Knoll Sisters today and be standing with all of these inspiring women. If Mother Mary Joseph herself were standing here today, I believe that she would say, we celebrate not only an individual or even the community she founded, the Mary Knoll Sisters, but she would say, we honor women everywhere who strive to make the world a better place for all. Truly, this was her inclusive worldwide vision. And I rejoice that many members of her family, the Rogers family, are here today, and I would ask them just to stand so we can recognize them. There's more in the back. And also, we have many members of the extended Mary Knoll family. Can I ask you to stand as well? Thank you all for your support. Last year, Mary Knoll Sisters celebrated our 100th anniversary. 100 years of living out Mother Mary Joseph's vision of compassionate service throughout the world. Beginning our second century of mission this year, we continue to reach out to those in need with her unprejudiced worldwide heart. Mary Josephine Rogers, known affectionately as Molly, came, as we heard, from a large and loving Irish Catholic family in Boston. She brought a family spirit of sharing, fun, and laughter to Mary Knoll. She developed an international outlook and an appreciation of diversity early in her life. Her collection of books and dolls from around the world exposed her to a reality far removed from Boston. Looking back on her life, she said, "At an early age, I was keenly alive to the existence of little sisters and brothers in far-off lands, quite different from myself in race, color, and creed." This open and worldwide heart was visible in her valedictory address at her graduation from West Roxbury High School in 1900. She chose the subject of tolerance and began by quoting St. Augustine. "In what is essential, unity. In what is indifferent, liberty. And in all things, charity." Unity, liberty, charity. These would be among the guiding principles of the missionary congregation that she founded in 1912. She was only 29 years of age when she took this major step. 9 years later, she sent the first 6 Maryknoll sisters to China. They pioneered a new approach to mission, going out 2 by 2 to live in the homes of poor villagers for weeks at a time, sharing the same hardships and way of life as the local people. Ahead of her time, even in her approach to prayer, she turned to the women mystics for inspiration. Teresa of Avila, famous mystic and doctor of the Church, became our patron. Mother Mary Joseph urged us to be contemplatives in action, meaning to combine work and prayer. And she urged us to learn to live in the presence of God. Mother Mary Joseph also taught us to respect other cultures and to be open to dialogue with people of diverse beliefs. Educating our new members, she told them, "Maryknoll does not go to turn Asians or Africans into Americans or Westerners. As far as customs go, we are the ones who do the changing over." She had a grasp of world affairs and was open to taking risks when the need for our service was great. She therefore did not hesitate to send her sisters into dangerous situations where they might face imprisonment, deportation, and even death. This was indeed the case in China, North Korea, Japan, and the Philippines. In recent years, we again shared the same fate of the poor when 2 of our sisters were murdered in El Salvador with 2 other church women. You may remember their names, Sisters Ida Ford and Mara Clark, together with Sisters Dorothy Kazel and lay missioner Jean Donovan. Although such sorrow and loss were part of Mother Mary Joseph's life, she had a joyful spirit and taught us to enjoy simple pleasures, the beauty of nature, the beauty of each person. She listed the saving grace of a sense of humor among the qualities that should distinguish a Maryknoll sister. Her own humor and sense of fun were contagious, and if I had the time, I could tell you many wonderful stories, but I'll only mention one. She said, "When I was a little girl, I used to dream of the time I would be rich enough to have a soda fountain in my own house." Instead, she introduced the custom of having ice cream sodas in every Maryknoll house around the world. Soon, on October 15th, the feast of our patron, St. Teresa of Avila. So I invite all of you to enjoy ice cream sodas this Tuesday, the feast of St. Teresa. Yes. Though the world has changed drastically in the past century, Mother Mary Joseph's example continues to inspire us as we translate her words and deeds into contemporary action. Today, we serve in 24 countries, caring for orphans who have lost their parents to AIDS, engaging in interreligious dialogue, reaching out to victims of human trafficking, accompanying migrants, advocating for the protection of the environment, offering peace education in situations of conflict, and trauma healing to victims of violence. We believe that Mother Mary Joseph's legacy lives on, not only in the women who joined Maryknoll, but in the thousands of people our lives have touched over the years. A graduate from one of our schools in the Philippines summed it up recently when she wrote, "Maryknoll sisters live on, if not in a National Hall of Fame like their founder, then in the hearts, minds, and lives of those they taught and loved." We give thanks for that legacy and for the honor of having Mother Mary Joseph Rogers join other prominent women in this National Women's Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you. Our 8th inductee is Bernice Resnik Sandler, a native of New York City. Bernice Resnik Sandler attended Brooklyn College, where she studied psychology, earning her BA in 1948. Dr. Sandler went on to earn her MA in clinical and school psychology from City College of New York and her doctorate in counseling and personnel services from the University of Maryland in 1969. During her tenure in 1969 to 1971 as chair of the Action Committee for Federal Contract Compliance of the Women's Equity Action League, she filed charges of sex discrimination against 250 educational institutions using a little-known federal executive order prohibiting contractors from discriminating against employees. It was this strategy that led to the first federal investigations of campus sex discrimination at a time when no laws existed to prohibit discrimination based on gender in education. Subsequently, Dr. Sandler was instrumental in the development and passage of Title IX, a law that was passed in 1972 requiring gender equity for boys and girls in every educational program that receives federal funding. Her involvement in this landmark legislation, an effort in which she has been involved in longer than anyone else, caused her to be dubbed the mother of Title IX. Among many firsts, Dr. Sandler served as the educational specialist for the House of Representatives Special Subcommittee on Education, making her the first woman ever appointed to a congressional committee staff to work specifically on women's issues. She wrote the education section for the first federal report on sex discrimination in education. And she was appointed by Presidents Ford and Carter as the first chair of the National Advisory Council on Women's Educational Programs. For your more than 4 decades of pioneering leadership in the struggle to ensure educational equality for women and girls, Bernice Resnik Sandler, you are now inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
I'm just overwhelmed with being here. I want to thank the National Women's Hall of Fame for this remarkable honor, and to my daughters and my grandchildren and other family members and friends and colleagues and cousins for their support during many years, and to my parents, long gone, who taught me many things, including, we didn't know the name for it then, but it really was about social justice, and also told me to ask questions when things didn't seem right. Add to this, I want to, it's an honor to be included with so many wonderful women in back of me there. Title IX was passed in 1972, and many people have said that this is the most important law passed for women and girls since women obtained the right to vote back in 1920. Some people know it as the sports law. Sometimes it's that damned sports law. But its power goes way beyond sports, way beyond it. It prohibits most forms of sex discrimination in schools and colleges. It covers employees, it covers students, and it prohibits most of the forms, whether it's sexual harassment or keeping females out of some school activities or programs or treating students differently because of their gender. It has changed the face of our educational institutions. I want to tell a story about one of my daughters, Emily, who was here today. When she was in high school, she was getting her driver's license, and she thought it would be a good idea to take a course in auto mechanics. And I said, yeah, that's great, go ahead and take it. So she tried to enroll, and they said, no, only boys are allowed. So I called the school, and I said, my daughter's applying for this course, and I've been told she can't take it. Could you explain this to me? And they said, well, it's this way. The boys have to wear coveralls when they're working on the cars, and there's only one bathroom in the classroom where she could change her overall coveralls and her clothing, so we can't let her do that, and so she can't take the course. Now, I'm a logical person, so I said, that's not a problem. She can use the bathroom down the hall, which she uses, for other things. That seemed to me pretty simple. And then the guy said, ma'am, now every woman here knows that when someone says, when someone says, ma'am, what is going to follow is not going to be what you want to hear. And so he said, you have to realize the boys use very bad language. And there wasn't anything I could do. Of course, later that night, I thought of saying, you haven't heard my daughter's language. But even if I had said that, it wouldn't have made any difference, because there was no recourse. You could just say, I don't like this, and that's not very effective. Title IX gave women and girls and boys and men, it covers sex, not just girls and women, but everybody. Title IX gave people a weapon to use when things like excluding girls from a class because they were girls, when that occurs. It can be used as a threat, which is really nice. This is Title IX. You could be sued for this. Wonderful thing to say when people are really pig-headed. It can be used as a way to figure out what kinds of new policies need to be developed or how to fix old policies and practices. It's an organizing tool to get people to think about gender, and it helps students, faculty, employees, and everybody in school and outside of schools begin to understand some of the differences in the ways in which men and women are treated, and boys and girls, and to understand their rights. I wanted to give you some examples of what was quite common before Title IX was passed. During one period in the 1960s, and I know most of you may not have been around then, but it was not that long ago in my life, there were 21,000 women in the state of Virginia who were rejected from admissions to state colleges and universities in Virginia. Now, during the same time when the 21,000 women are rejected, how many men do you think were rejected? 0. Not one male was rejected, and I have often wondered what happened to those 21,000. I know that most of them never got to college because of that. And what Title IX did was get rid of those quotas. Here's an example in sports from the University of Michigan. Like most institutions, the budget for men's varsity sports was over $1 million, which would be nothing today, but in those days was a big budget for sports. And what do you think the budget was for women's varsity sports? 0, yes. And what the women athletes had to do, and they did this at many institutions, they would sell apples. In some institutions they sold Christmas trees, but at Michigan it was apples. And they would use that money not to pay for all of their expenses, because they couldn't raise that much money. They used that money to pay for part of their uniforms, part of their travel costs, part of their equipment, because their budget was zero. Can you try to imagine a football team having a bake sale to pay for their shoulder pads? Okay. The few women faculty that were hired in those days were often paid less, sometimes even worked for nothing. I knew of one woman scientist, an assistant professor at one of the most prestigious schools in the West, where her husband also taught. He was a full professor. She was an assistant professor with a very small stipend and no office. But she finally was promoted and given an office and given a raise when she was awarded the Nobel Prize for her work. Yeah. Now, when Title IX was passed, I was extraordinarily naive as to how social change occurred. I really thought it would take 1 year to get rid of sex discrimination. We would simply tell someone that they were discriminating, and they would be very polite and say, "I am so sorry, I won't do that anymore." And at the end of a year, I realized it was going to take a little longer. And over the years, I kept extending my estimate of how long this was going to take. It was clearly going to take longer than my foolish estimate. Getting Title IX passed was really the easy part compared to the work that was needed to make Title IX actually to be a law with power in it. Change does not occur spontaneously simply because there's a new law in place. It took hard work, mostly by women, but also by some very good men too, to press for the changes in policies, to press for the changes in practices and in behaviors. Someone had to be the person to start a group to say that a particular discriminatory practice or rule was not fair and a violation of Title IX. Someone had to gather data, sometimes secretly and at great risk, and analyze that data to show that the rule or practice was discriminatory and to develop new policies and practices. Change is slow and a painful process. You don't make friends when you point out that something is very wrong, that it's illegal, and that people might sue you, and all of those things. You don't do that except at your own peril. There are some women, many women were not promoted, many women were fired, many women did not get tenure, many women did not get raises, many lost their jobs. There were even some who had to go on welfare. These are the true unsung heroes of Title IX because they did the hard work of raising unpleasant facts, pushing for change. Simply having a law in place is not enough. It's only the first step. Much has been accomplished with Title IX, although there is still much to do. We like to think that there's been a lot of progress in athletics, and indeed there has, but we have really only gone from absolutely horrid to very bad, and there is still a long way to go ahead. Let me just give you one figure. The number of high school women athletes that are participating in high school athletics today is less than the number of male high school athletes who were participating in sports when Title IX was first passed back in 1972. So we haven't even caught up to the level of male high school participation in sports that was there 40 years ago. So you can see we have a long way to go. Most high schools, most college athletic programs are not in compliance with Title IX. Another area of concern is that of sexual assault. Here's a dreadful figure. About 20 to 25% of college women students, and if you know women students in college, or will have some coming up, you should think about this, about 20 to 25% of them will experience either attempted or actual sexual assault from someone they knew while they are in college. That rate is about the rate that it is for women in the military, and it is lower than the rate for sexual assault for women who are not in college. That is a stunning figure, and we have a very long way to go. Now, people are always asking me questions about Title IX, and I love to talk about it. And recently, a reporter asked me if I had any grandchildren. All three of them are here today, and I said, yes, I have 2 grandsons and 1 granddaughter, and they're all in college. And then he asked me how Title IX affected them. And I have to say, there was a little piece of me that wanted to say that my granddaughter was a terrific athlete and had an athletic scholarship and all of that. And my granddaughter, at the age of 8 or 9, was in a soccer team, and she played about 3 games, and then she asked her mother if she could quit. And my daughter said, "Why do you want to quit?" And Jessica said, "I just don't care about what happens to a ball." And even though Jessica is not involved in athletics, she's a tremendous hiker and she does lots of physical activities. Geez. But in any event, I lost my place. Excuse me. Then I thought again, what has the real effect been of Title IX on my grandchildren? And I really thought for almost maybe 20 or 30 seconds, which is a long time when someone is interviewing you. All 3 of my grandchildren, and they're all in college, all 3 of them throughout their young lives have had friends, genuine friendships with people of the other gender where there was no sexual or romantic issues involved. They are just genuine friends regardless of the gender. That kind of relationship was almost impossible when I was growing up. I can remember having discussions with other girlfriends in terms of what we called platonic relationships. You may not know that term, but it meant non-sexual. And we would say, can a man and woman really be friends without being sexually involved? We now know that that's quite easy to do when there is equality between men and women, and this has really changed. In the long run, this is what Title IX is ultimately all about. Respectful relationships between boys and girls and men and women. This is not just a women's movement. It is not just a feminist movement. It is a worldwide revolution which will take generations to fulfill and will have as much impact on the world as the Industrial Revolution has had. It is a revolution that is changing the relationships between men and women in a way that has never before happened in human history. We have only just begun. We have taken the very first faltering steps of a very long journey, and our schools, our colleges, the United States, our country, and the world will never again be the same. Thank you very much for this honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
May I say, you have one cool grandmother. You're a little embarrassed, but we worked through it. Last but certainly not least, our 9th inductee is Nancy Pelosi. Nancy D'Alessandro was born in Baltimore, Maryland, with a strong family tradition of public service. Her late father, Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., served as mayor of Baltimore for 12 years, after representing the city for 5 terms in Congress. Her brother, Thomas D'Alessandro III, also served as mayor of Baltimore. In 1962, she graduated from Trinity College in Washington, D.C. 1 year later, she married Paul Pelosi, a native of San Francisco, where they settled with their 5 children. As she raised her children, she worked as a volunteer for the Democratic Party and served on the San Francisco Library Commission. In 1987, she won a special election to represent the city of San Francisco in the House of Representatives. 14 years later, in 2001, her colleagues elected her House Democratic Whip and then House Democratic Leader in 2002, making her the first woman to hold both positions, finally breaking the marble ceiling of the United States Capitol. You better, there's a lot more, relax. Nancy Pelosi was elected by her colleagues to serve as the first woman Speaker of the House from 2007 to 2011. During her many years of service, she has worked tirelessly to increase the number of women in public service. And through her leadership, she has paved the way for many more women to enter politics. As Speaker, Pelosi's legislative accomplishments included the passage of the landmark Affordable Care Act, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. Lily, could you stand? She's an inductee to the Hall of Fame. And strong Wall Street reforms and the historic investments in clean energy and innovation. During her many years of service, she has worked tirelessly to increase the number of women in public service, and through her leadership, she has paved the way for many more women to enter politics. For your pioneering service as the first woman Speaker of the United States House of Representatives and the first woman in American history to lead a major political party in Congress, Nancy Pelosi, you are inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much for that generous testimonial. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Beth, for your leadership. I want to thank Ellen Riddleberger for nominating me for this wonderful honor. And I accept it with love and gratitude to my family, to my husband, Paul Pelosi, my husband of 50 years this September. Stand up, Paul. Stand up, Paul. With love and gratitude to our 5 children, 2 of whom are here, Nancy Corinne with her daughter Madeline, Nancy Corinne, and my daughter Christine, who is here with her daughter Bella. There are 2 granddaughters. We have 7 grandsons, and they, with my daughter Jacqueline, my daughter Alexandra, and our son Paul, send their best wishes and look forward to visiting Seneca Falls when we can spend a much longer period of time. I accept this with the honor of receiving it with so many distinguished awardees today. To be in this company enhances this honor enormously for me. I'm so blessed. Thank you for your leadership. Every one of them, and the persons for whom they speak, the top of their field. And of course, I accept it in recognition that none of the things that you mentioned would have happened without my colleagues, many of whom are here today. Please stand so that we can all see you. We'll be back to them. We'll be back to them shortly. But first, I want to say what an honor it is to be here on this occasion, but what a treat it is to be in Seneca Falls and to have been in Rochester yesterday. I really have a sort of an attraction to this area for reasons other than Seneca Falls, as well as Seneca Falls. And that's because our colleague Louise Slaughter, who represents this area in Congress, Louise Slaughter, brags about it all the time, about the work ethic, the entrepreneurial spirit, the creativity in the arts, and you name it, it's here. And she just cannot say enough about it. However, I also am pleased to be here because when we saw earlier today the film and the pictures of the mill and where the new museum was going to be, it was right there on the Erie Canal. Now, Erie Canal was one of the first infrastructure projects, grand infrastructure projects in our country. Thomas Jefferson said, as he was building and buying new territory for our country, we have to have mobility. So this is an historic place in so many ways, has led the way. Here today, we're celebrating how this area led the way with the rights of women. 15 years ago, Louise invited us here, and many of the women members came to celebrate and observe the 150th anniversary of the Seneca Falls Declaration. and to Rochester to see the home of Susan B. Anthony, but to see it all here in the park. It was a transforming experience for all who came, because you could see firsthand and learn more about the courage that it took for these women to do what they did now 165 years ago. And that they said at the time, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. And went on to say, such is now the necessity for women to demand the equal station to which they are entitled. So for the next few minutes, I will answer some of the questions that I have been asked by the press and by some of you as to what today means to me, to all of us. When I became the leader in the Congress, my colleagues have heard me tell this story over and over, but when I became the leader was after we had been to Seneca Falls a few years later. I went to my first meeting at the White House as the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives. And I wasn't having any apprehension about the occasion because I had been to the White House many, many, many times as an appropriator, as an Intelligence Committee person. So I didn't even think about being apprehensive. When I went to the meeting and the door closed behind me, and I saw the President, the Vice President, and the other leaders of Congress, House and Senate, Democratic and Republican, I realized that this was unlike any meeting that any woman had ever been to before in the White House. Not only me, but any woman. That I was there with not my presence there derived from the President's appointment, but as a representative of my caucus. And as I sat down, and President George W. Bush, ever gracious and welcoming, and while he was speaking, at my chair, I felt very, very closed in. Very, very closed in. I didn't know what was happening, and I could vaguely pay attention to what he was saying. And then I realized that sitting on my chair with me was Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Alice Paul, Sojourner Truth, you name it. They were right there. It was very, very tight. I can't imagine what the President must have been thinking at the time as I was squeezing in to make room for them and others. And then I could hear them say, at last, we have a seat at the table. At last, we have a seat at the table. And then they were gone. And then they were gone. And my first thought was, we want more. We want more. And so how did I get from the kitchen to the Congress to that seat at the table? And what role models did I have on that path? Well, my first and foremost, my role model was my mother. She was a wonderful woman. She had 7 children. She as my father, were very civically involved and always taught us that, true to our Catholic faith, we had a responsibility one to another to look after people. And the best way I can explain her to you is to read a little piece of a prayer that she wrote about her mother and about what moms mean to the world and what our responsibilities are and how grateful we are to have a good mother. And it goes like this. Mother, I think of you, guardian angel of my childhood. Who can fathom the real meaning of the word mother? Whose hearts are not filled with the memory of her who has not stopped loving us from the first moment of our existence, when, like a ray of sunshine that beamed down into our cradle, when the fingers of care and worry had not yet touched our hearts, it was Mother who was always around, preventing their entrance into the holy island of childhood. Goes on and on. Then it says, even when the word mother is spoken by an old man, it sounds like it comes from the lips of a child. Goes on, and then at the end it says, in a few words, mother is God's co-helper and a radiant beam from the mother of mercy. That's part of what her prayer was. And of course, she wrote that in honor of her own mother, but it was a message to us as to how I could be a mother. I was 6 boys, 1 girl, so it was really a message more to me. And she was my role model. My brother, Tommy, who's 11 years older than I, he used to say that during the Depression, somebody would knock on the door. You don't ever know if they wanted a job, if they needed a housing project, if they needed whatever they needed, but 9 chances out of 10, they would end up at the dining room table because they needed food, and there was never any thought that anyone would be turned away. That was, again, our Catholic faith. That was our manifestation of it was in civic and community action. The way I got from getting married, having 5 children in 6 years, 50 years ago, and so involved in that and trying to remember my mother's words about what a mother should be, I, as was mentioned, had some involvement as a volunteer, as a Democrat, because when our family, we were very proud of our Italian-American heritage, very proud of our heritage, very patriotically American, very devoutly Catholic, and very staunchly Democratic. And so that I had time for in my volunteer activities. And one day, the woman who was the member of Congress came to me and said, "I'm not going to run for re-election, you must run." And I mean, imagine a woman handing off to a woman. This is highly unusual. There simply just weren't that many women around. Sala Burton was her name, and I want you to hear this story about 16-year-olds and their moms. So for her, because I loved her, I contemplated. I never intended to run for office. Never did. Never. I was a behind-the-scenes person wanting to promote others, and then she was insisting that she would feel better if I would run for her seat. And so other people suggested that might be a good idea. So 4 of our children were already in college. So I went to our daughter Alexandra, who at that time was about 16 and a half, and I said, "Alexandra, Mommy has this opportunity to run for Congress. I love my life. You know, if one more year," because she was young for her class, "one more year you would be in college. So if you don't want me to run, I'm happy not to run, and I'm happy to be home with you." And I said, "I might not even win. I'm just talking about running for Congress." To which she said, "Mother, get a life." Is that it? Is that it? Mother, get a life. Well, I had never heard that expression before. This was 26 years ago. And so I had a life, but I got a congressional life when I went on to win. And here we are 26 years later. But what I'm really here to tell you about is where we go from here. Where they say, what is your legacy getting this award? Where do you go from here? And I want again salute my female colleagues in the House of Representatives, because we have decided, after observing the scene for a while, that incrementalism is not working for us. It's nice to keep adding numbers, but we want more. We want more. And so we have to make our own environment. We keep making the battle in the context of an arena, an atmosphere that was not set up for the success of women. It was about just trying to beat your way into the door. And I believe that 2 ways for us to change the environment relate to policy, and it relates to politics. On July of this year, on the 165th anniversary of the Seneca Falls Declaration, the women members of the House, with a few good men, stood with us there, and we saluted what happened in the words that were used of all men and women are created equal, and we decided and had worked together to form what would make the biggest difference. And our initiative was entitled, "When Women Succeed, America Succeeds." And springing from the Seneca Falls Convention, We said there are 3 things that we could do that would change the respect for women in the workplace. What would they be? And they would be the following. First of all, under the leadership of Rosa DeLauro, who is this is her brainchild, but working with all of the other members, working with Donna Edwards of Maryland and Doris Matsui, the chair and vice chair of our Women's Caucus, they put together and studied and listened to people all over the country these 3 things. 1, equal pay for equal work. Equal pay for equal work. Doesn't sound very new, does it? But long overdue. And Rosa has the bill, the Paycheck Fairness Act. We were very proud. Rosa's bill was the Lilly Ledbetter bill, named for Lilly. And Lilly, we could not be more honored. You are an icon. You are a heroine. We are so delighted that you are here today, Lilly Ledbetter. The Lilly Ledbetter bill legislation was very important, but we still have to have pay equity. And one of the elements of it, of course, is also to raise the minimum wage. But 62% of the people who make the minimum wage are women, and we have to have better respect for the role of women in the workplace. Secondly, we have had, and many of us were part of passing the family and medical leave, which was very important. But for many, it is not paid. So we want paid leave that helps men and women in the workplace. And third, and this is really connected to our suffragettes, they worked so hard. They worked so hard to get women to have the right to vote. In fact, when women got the right to vote, finally, decades later, the newspapers reported women given the right to vote. Now, that wasn't what happened. Women fought, women marched, women sacrificed, women demanded, and then women got the right to vote. But nobody gave it to women. And it was a tremendous victory for America, not just for women, but for America. And then decades later, we had women in the workforce, World War II, Rosie the Riveter. And so that was new, all these women leaving home to go to work. That was good. And then we had the higher education of women, women in the professions are choosing to stay home or have whatever job they wanted, and perhaps at the professional level. But the missing link in all of that was affordable, quality child care. Affordable, quality child care. So our observance of the 165th anniversary of the Seneca Falls Convention is this initiative, When Women Succeed, America Succeeds, and taking us all to the next step. We have the legislation to do this. We need the outside mobilization to make it happen. So that's on the policy side. If we have women free to follow their passion and their profession or stay home, whatever it is, but they have those options. And it's good for men too. It's good for families. On the political side, again, if we're going to make change, instead of electing 10 more women, whatever it is, and we're very proud of the way our numbers have increased, we must change the environment. And I promise you this, if you reduce the role of money in politics and increase the level of civility in politics, you will elect many more women to public office. And that is something that will be very wholesome for our country. If you do both, you'll be able to see our country benefit from women in our national security, women in our economic security, women in the academic world, the athletic world, you name it, every place. This will be the most wholesome and successful thing we can do for American competitiveness. And so we have instituted a DARE on this reducing the role of money, disclose where this money comes from, amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United, reform our system to increase the power of small donors in the system, and empower, remove obstacles of participation to voting for the American people. If we are fighting for that dare, and across the country, people know that it has to be done. And when it is done, more women, more minorities, more young people will have more opportunity to serve our country in public office. And by the way, I'm very proud that these women here today are part of the House Democratic Caucus is over 50% women, minorities, and LGBT community members. Is that not exciting? So again, people ask me, why do you do this? How do you have so much energy to do this all the time? And the only reason I ever ran for public office in the first place was because being a mom and seeing all the love and attention and opportunity that my children, our relatives, all the rest, the children around us had, and realizing that 1 in 5 children in America lives in poverty, it was a completely intolerable and has been a completely intolerable idea to me. Not to mention children throughout the world by incident of birth who have so many needs that are not being attended to. So that's why when I accepted the gavel to be the Speaker of the House when I did, I invited the children to come up because I wanted to accept the gavel on behalf of all of America's children and beyond. And so, in accepting this wonderful award, I want my colleagues to come up so I can accept it with all of them. Come on up, everybody wants to see you. Come on. I'm going to introduce first our New Yorkers. Anita Lowy, you know Louise Slaughter, of course, Carolyn Maloney, and Congresswoman, where is she? Nydia Velasquez. Yes. The 4 of them have been chairs, historic chairs of committees in the Congress, women chairs, and they will be again. Then from California, there are 9 of us. Can you imagine that there are 9 of us from California? We have Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, a champion on breast cancer, I might say, Susan. Anna Eshoo. Lois Capps, a healthcare provider herself and a champion to pass the Affordable Care Act. Susan Davis, a champion for women in the military. Doris Matsui and Jan Schakowsky, the co-chairs of meeting the needs of older women and Medicare and Social Security. Jan Schakowsky and Jan Schakowsky from Illinois. Jackie Spear, our champion against fighting sexual abuse in the military. Barbara Lee, a champion on issues that relate to women and the poor. Janice Hahn, a champion for women's right to choose. Come on, all of you. That was just the California list. And now, as I mentioned, Rosa DeLauro, she's the godmother of all of this. Come here, Rosa. Donna Edwards of Maryland. Betty McCullum of Minnesota. Where's Betty? Gwen Moore. Where's Betty? Where's Gwen Moore? She's coming. The author of the Violence Against Women Act. I hasten to add that when we first had the Violence Against Women Act in the 90s, Louise Slaughter, she was the first and foremost author of the Violence Against Women Act. Harold Shea Porter of New Hampshire, Harold Shea Porter, and Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. All of them champions in the Congress of the United States, all of them fighters for the Affordable Care Act, where no longer being a woman is a pre-existing medical condition. So, in closing, I'll just say this. Before I came to Congress, I was active in the Democratic Party. I was chair of the California Democratic Party, and we were trying to get the Democratic Convention in San Francisco. So the group came to see our bid and all of that, and a woman who was a member of Congress and really the mother to us all in Congress, Lindy Boggs of Louisiana, she was on the selection committee, and I knew her. Her husband and my father served together in the 40s in Congress, but I knew her. She was just this wonderful person I idolized. And she said to me, "How are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm doing great. I'm the chair of the party. I'm going to be the chair of the host committee for the convention." I was telling her some things, and I said, "I think I have too many titles. I think I should surrender one of those titles." And she said, "Darling, no man would have ever said that." And what she said was, "Know thy power." So I say to her, I take her words and say, "Know your power." It's not just about women for women, it's about women being respected as well as men being respected. It's about diversity of opinion. It's about changing the environment so that we have the fullest participation and therefore the fullest benefit of everyone in our country. These women are there to make it happen. We want their numbers to grow and increase. I wanted them to be here, not to honor me, but to honor the Women's Hall of Fame by saying to you, what you are doing is important, by recognizing women and by paying our respects to the other honorees as well. Thank you so. I accept on behalf of my sisters here. Thank you all very much.
Bravo, Nancy! Bravo! You did a great job! Great job!
Well, that was a moment. Congratulations, Congresswoman Pelosi, and thanks to all of you for coming from Washington. Congresswoman, when you go back to Washington, tell them about the National Women's Hall of Fame, and also have some fun with them and tell them that you were all honored at a Tea Party event, all right? That'll get them talking in Washington. Well, we leave here inspired by you, empowered, and obviously so grateful to all of you. We stand on your shoulders every day, and we are truly humbled to be in your presence. Thanks to all of you for making today possible. And I must point out that this is a labor of love every year, every other year to pull this together. So please join me in welcoming back up the two women, Beth and Beverly, who made it possible.
All right. We'd just like to, first of all, congratulate all of you, our inductees. You can see how inspired we all are by all of you. Your own story is unique, as you heard today, yet in many ways common to each other. You pioneered, led the way, and sharing your stories gives us all the encouragement to continue finding ways to open doors, to pave the way for those who come behind, all the while knowing we are rooted in this place, Seneca Falls, where it began 165 years ago. And thank you again, Ginny, again, for your ongoing friendship. It's been a pleasure working with you. And we're going to ask if you, this concludes our ceremony, and we thank all of you for joining us today. We want to see you in 2015. It will be our 25th induction ceremony. So thanks again for being here. We'd like the inductees to please stand for a formal photo. And then we are going to have a recessional, so if you can then follow us as we have the inductees lead, and then everybody can follow. And let's conclude our tea for today.